Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. You talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. And as promised over the weekend, I said that I would have my Chicago Bears scheduled prediction today by 3:30, and I always try to come through with my promises. So today on the episode of Keek on the Mic, I will give you guys my Chicago Bears schedule prediction. And my initial reaction, as I'm now going to put the Chicago Bears schedule on the screen, my initial reaction to it is that it's pretty favorable for the Chicago Bears. And something that I want to get off my chest before I kind of give my win and loss predictions for the Chicago Bears this season is that I totally disagree that the Bears are only a 3-win team. When I see that on Bleacher Report, when I see that around social media, people saying the Bears are going to go 3-14, I don't think the Bears are that bad. Yes, I think we can all agree that the Bears are in a rebuilding, kind of reconstruction year for this roster, and we have a lot of young guys, which is going to be exciting. And we have no expectations, which is also kind of nice. You know, you kind of can sit back and kind of watch these young guys kind of compete every week and try to get some wins. So that will be pretty fun to watch. But I don't think the Chicago Bears are only a 3-win team. And that's just my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, you can comment down below in the comment section. But I'll say it right here on Keek on the Mic that I do not think the Chicago Bears are a 3-win football team this season. They are not that bad in my personal opinion. So like always, as I go through each week, feel free to comment down below. Give me your record prediction for the Chicago Bears this season. And you can even go week by week with me as well as I go week by week and give you guys my Chicago Bears record prediction. So starting off with week 1, we will be hosting the San Francisco 49ers at home, which is really, really nice that we open up the season at home. I think the last couple of years we opened up the season on the road. So it's nice to be at Soldier Field and open up against the San Francisco 49ers. What intrigues me about this game is that, you know, obviously there's some kind of quarterback controversy over there in San Francisco. We don't know if it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo or if it's going to be Trey Lance. I'm kind of hoping it's Trey Lance because the intrigue of that matchup between Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Obviously, Trey Lance went number 3 overall, and obviously Justin Fields went 11th to the Chicago Bears. And I feel like that would be huge intrigue for a lot of football fans to see Trey Lance and Justin Fields go at it at week 1. So I'm hoping that Trey Lance is a starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, we played the 49ers last year, and they just dominated the Chicago Bears, especially in the second half. I feel like that was a game that the Chicago Bears could have won, but the defense just couldn't get any stops on Jimmy Garoppolo and that San Francisco 49ers offense. But for some reason, I think the Chicago Bears at home, obviously, we don't know what we're going to see with the offense and even with the defense side of the football for the Chicago Bears. So it's going to be a mystery for everyone, especially Chicago Bears fans. But I think the Chicago Bears get the slight upset at home week 1 and beat the San Francisco 49ers to go 1-0 and start the season off strong. Going into week 2, we are heading to Lambeau Field for a Sunday night football matchup with the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, we had to expect this one. We always play the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field in primetime football at least once a season. And obviously, I can't go against Aaron Rodgers. He's just been total domination against our Chicago Bears. And it hurts me to say this. I hope the tide turns soon. But as of right now, the Bears haven't given me any reason to pick them against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, even without Devontae Adams, and even with all the players that they've lost in the offseason. Some way, somehow, Aaron Rodgers will probably find a way to beat us at home in primetime football. So I have the Bears losing that one in week 2 against the Green Bay Packers. In week 3, we travel back home to Soldier Field to take on the Houston Texans. And this is going to be fun because Lovie Smith is now the new head coach of the Houston Texans. He will come back to Chicago to face his old team in the Chicago Bears. So this will be a fun one. But going back to how I was saying, I don't think the Chicago Bears are a 3-win team. I think they're going to be better than that. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. When I look at the Houston Texans, they have a lot of holes. I think the Houston Texans are going to be pretty bad. I think these are the games that we have to win, and I think the Bears should have no reason no excuses but to dominate the Houston Texans at home in week 3, which is why I'm giving the Chicago Bears the win against the Houston Texans. Then we travel to the New York Giants, and this is another game. I think we are better than the New York Giants at this point in time. I think obviously they have a new head coach in Brian Daboll, and obviously they have Daniel Jones. He's still kind of an iffy quarterback in the NFL. I think this is going to be his last shot as the New York Giants quarterback. But these stretch of games, especially in week 3 and 4, these are games that are very winnable games for the Chicago Bears, and these are the games that we need to try to come out and win. As when we look later in the season, there's going to be a stretch of games that are going to be really, really tough for the Chicago Bears. But I have the Bears taking the win against the Giants in New York, week 4 against the Giants. Moving on to week 5, we travel to Minnesota to take on the Minnesota Vikings. And I don't think the Minnesota Vikings are bad at all. Obviously, I feel like Kirk Cousins last year played like a top 10 quarterback. Obviously, still have Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson. That offense is a high-powered offense, and I think it's going to be a tough game for the Chicago Bears, especially traveling to Minnesota. So I have the Vikings taking this one in Week 5 against the Chicago Bears. In Week 6, we have a Thursday Night Football primetime game against the Washington Commanders against Carson Wentz. And this is another game that is a very winnable game for the Chicago Bears. We travel home, play a primetime Thursday Night Football game at Soldier Field, so it should be electric in Chicago. And I think the Chicago Bears can come out with the win against Carson Wentz and the Washington Commanders to make their record 4-2. I don't think there's any excuse in the first 6 weeks of the NFL season for the Chicago Bears that it's a realistic option that they can either be 4-2 or 3-3 in the first 6 games. And that would be pretty funny because, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there's a lot of people that are speculating that the Bears are only going to win 3 games. I'm going to repeat this a lot in the podcast. I think the Bears are better than a 3-win football team. So I think there's no excuse that the Bears could possibly go either 3-3 or 4-2 in the first 6 weeks of the NFL season. So week 7 through 9 this is where it's going to get a little bit tough for the Chicago Bears. And this is why it's important for the Bears to get off or try to get off to a hot start in the first 6 weeks, because in week 7, we travel to New England to take on Mac Jones and the Patriots on Monday Night Football. And this is where it's hard to do schedule predictions because on paper right now, I think the New England Patriots are probably a more complete football team than the Chicago Bears. And I think that's a fair argument to have. And I'm not saying the Bears are not going to be competitive, but on paper right now, I just think the Patriots are a better team. And who knows what the Patriots does this year, and who knows what the Chicago Bears do this year in the season. They could shock us all. But as of right now, I have the Chicago Bears dropping this one on Monday Night Football to the New England Patriots. And then the very next week, in week 8, we travel to the Dallas Cowboys. And I also think this one is going to be a loss. I feel like this is still a very good Dallas Cowboys team with Dak Prescott as their starting quarterback. I still feel like he is a top 10 quarterback in this league. And that's going to be a tough game in Dallas to try to beat a very good, in my opinion, a very good Dallas Cowboys team. So I also have the Bears dropping that one to the Cowboys. Then we travel back home in week 9 and take on the Miami Dolphins. And this one, to me, can go either way. I truly feel it just depends on what is the game plan for Tua. I think he is a very shaky quarterback in the NFL. I feel like if we can get to him, get the pressure, and make him a little bit nervous, cause some turnovers, I think this is a very winnable game. But once again, on paper right now, I do think the Miami Dolphins may have the slight edge and may be a better football team than the Chicago Bears right now. And that could change, like I mentioned. The Chicago Bears can shock us and just be game busters all year long, but we don't know that yet. So at the moment, I also have the Bears dropping this one to the Miami Dolphins at home in week 9. So as you can see, that's going to be a tough stretch. I think that's going to be the first stretch of football games that we find out what the Chicago Bears team is made of. And obviously, we all know that we have no expectations for our football team, right? Obviously, we want to see them win, but the only expectation we have is for hopefully Justin Fields to take the next step, and hopefully this offense gain some type of rhythm and gain identity for themselves, right? I feel like if we can see that from the Chicago Bears football team, us as Chicago Bears fans, I think we would be happy and we would be very content with that alternative of the Chicago Bears offense and Justin Fields taking that next step. Moving on to week 10, we take on the Detroit Lions at home, and until the Lions can prove that they can beat us consistently, which they haven't done at all, I think this is a very winnable game for the Chicago Bears. I think they beat the Detroit Lions in week 10 at home. And then we travel to Atlanta to take on the Atlanta Falcons. And this is another team that I think is going to be, that could possibly be worse than the Chicago Bears. And I think this is also a very winnable game for the Chicago Bears. I think we also win this game in Week 11 against the Falcons. Then we travel back to New York, this time to take on Zach Wilson and the Jets. And this is going to be a very intriguing game, obviously. Obviously, you have Zach Wilson taking 2nd overall, Justin Fields taking 11th. It's almost like the same intrigue as the Trey Lance versus Justin Fields matchup in Week 1 against the Niners. This is also going to be a very fun game to watch. I think even though the Jets added a lot of talent for Zach Wilson, this is going to be a very good game. I'm not taking the Jets lightly, but I think this is also a very winnable game for the Chicago Bears, and I'm going to give the Bears the win in New York against the Jets in Week 12. Then Week 13, we take on the Green Bay Packers once again, this time at home. And once again, as long as I have Aaron Rodgers, and until the Chicago Bears can prove that they can beat them consistently, I'm going to give the edge to the Green Bay Packers. And once again, I am basically saying that, actually, that the Green Bay Packers are going to sweep the Chicago Bears, which really hurts my soul. And then we have a really late bye, which that's one of the things that I hated about this year's schedule, is that our bye is not until Week 14, which is going to be a really tough situation for a first-year head coach in Matt Eberflus. So our bye week is in Week 14, and then coming back off the bye in Week 15, we have a home game against I would say a pretty good Philadelphia Eagles team. Obviously, they just added A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts seems like he is on his way to being a pretty good quarterback in the NFL. And this is going to be a tough game off the bye for the Chicago Bears. And I'm going to say at the moment, I'm going to give the Eagles the edge over our Chicago Bears in Week 15. And then we have another home game in Week 16, so back-to-back home games here against a very good Buffalo Bills team. This is a team that could possibly be Super Bowl contenders this year with Josh Allen leading the way. And the cool thing about this game is that it's a Christmas Eve game at Soldier Field, so you know it's going to be electric. Everyone's going to have their, Santa Claus costumes on, just supporting their Chicago Bears, so it's going to be a really fun game to watch. But unfortunately, I just think right now on paper that we are going to be way overmatched to try to beat the Buffalo Bills. And you know what? Crazy things happen in the NFL all the time, but as of right now, I'm going to give the Bears a loss against the Buffalo Bills in Week 16. Week 17, we travel to the Detroit Lions to take on the Lions once again, and I think we sweep the Lions once again this season. Once again, I feel like how I describe how until the Bears can prove that they can beat the Packers consistently, I'm going to give the Packers edge. The same goes for the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have to prove to me that they can beat the Chicago Bears consistently before I would even consider picking them to beat the Chicago Bears. And obviously, I want the Bears to win all for the football games, but obviously we have to be a little bit realistic when we're going through the schedule for the Chicago Bears. So I think the Bears beat the Lions in Week 17. And then our final game, Week 18, is a home game. And this was pretty cool because usually we travel to Minnesota to end the season, but this year, the Minnesota Vikings travel to Soldier Field to end the season. And something's telling me that we split with the Minnesota Vikings in the Matt Nagy era, and this can be different with the Eberflus era, but when we look at the Matt Nagy era, we played pretty well against the Minnesota Vikings. So I can definitely see us, especially late in the season, injuries happen. You don't know what's going to be going on with both sides for both teams. But I think we can definitely split with the Minnesota Vikings, and I can see the Bears taking this one at home, Week 18, and beating the Minnesota Vikings. So after going through my schedule prediction, the final record prediction for the Chicago Bears is 9-8. And let me tell you guys something. If the Bears go 8-9 or 9-8, and let's say we don't make the playoffs, which is totally fine, that would be a successful season. Because just like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there's a lot of people saying that we're going to either go 3-14, right? 4-13. They don't even think we're going to get past that five win mark, which to me, I find it ridiculous. When you look at the schedule, there's definitely some rough patches there that I think the Bears will kind of struggle, but there's also some patches there where they can, tally up wins in back-to-back weeks. So overall, I think this is a very favorable schedule for the Chicago Bears, and I feel like this is going to be a very fun season for the Chicago Bears and Chicago Bears fans, because the only expectation we have is hoping that Justin Fields takes that next step and develops into that franchise quarterback that we all know he can be. So How do you guys feel about my record prediction? Do you think the Bears will go 9-8, or do you think maybe they will be a 3-14 team? Let me know down below in the comment section. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Keek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You